Okay, part two of the difference between sports and fighting in the ring as opposed to other martial arts disciplines. Okay, now let's look at the combat cycle itself, okay? Combat starts at a very premature time compared to when an actual physical fight occurs. In other words, before you are in a position where you are actually just using your force of will, strength, power, there's a tremendous amount of things that happen, okay? And to focus exclusively on those aspects is to lose 90%, 95 even more, probably like 97% or so of the skills of a martial artist, okay? By the time you get to the point where you're just in there and have to depend on fight itself, raw, okay? You've exhausted a tremendous amount of other parts of the cycle in which conflict ensues. All right? Let that burn in a second. It's important. Now, again, we used to do a drill. You would just fight. Um, we were training with these Bondo guys and stuff, and you would just smack each other as hard as you could, as long as you could. This was when I was much younger, and it was different. It was different back then. Anyway, the point being, it's a part of martial arts. Yes, you should know how to do that. Okay. However, there's also a lot of currency to the idea that if you let it get to that point, you've already kind of shown yourself to either be overwhelmed or undertrained. Okay? So the actual cycle of combat starts the minute that you sense a possibility that there might be something amiss. Okay? You will learn this if you grew up in the city. You will understand this thinking. When you're walking down the street and you don't even see, but you can just clearly make out a situation developing. Okay, it's the same sort of thing where you see something on a crane in the sky shaking. Okay, you just feel a certain energy, and you walk in a different place. All right, your skills as a martial artist start way back then. Okay, and that's where you chart the progress of the conflict from. Okay, not from the monkey dance, as Rory Miller puts it in his wonderful books on self-protection. The monkey dance being when you start pushing each other. Oh yeah, oh yeah, and pushing each other in the chest. Oh yeah, okay, way before then. Okay, so you set up your way of dealing with that. That's a big part of being a martial artist. Okay, you strategize to put yourself in the most advantageous position. Okay, that's one of the things about multiple opponents and weapons, and you have opportunities if you're really training to suss out what's going on that way and act accordingly. Okay, and a big part of your training is understanding that, how you have self-control so you don't panic and you're able to exercise your skills. Which brings me to this next crap that they peddle in the martial arts community, that you see the guy, he takes a rib roast and a knife and he cuts it and he looks at you like, that's your flesh with a knife. Listen, people die by the knife every day in knife attacks. People also survive knife attacks every day. Okay? And to think that you cannot survive that situation is foolhardy. Okay? You can. You have certain things that are against you. It's tough. Okay? But it's doable. Okay? I'd speak from experience. Okay? I've been attacked that way. And I've trained against how to fight when somebody's attacking you with a knife, particularly. um, for years. Okay? Anyway, with that being said, so that aspect of martial arts involves strategy, planning, intent, skills that you build with your conscious mind. Okay? In that respect, they have some similarity to fighting skills as you spar or fight. Okay? Because you you're teaching yourself how to think levels to the game and apply. Okay? So for example, you watch a great fighter like Roy Jones, okay? He'll fake 2 times with his hook, right? And then when he gets the reaction he wants, he'll mix it up. He's set that technique up, okay? That's his boxing ability, understanding of distance, timing, and strategy, okay? And that's a big part of training, okay? A lot of our movement training, and things of that nature, we do those type of things, and you know that's so you're covering now about two different parts of, let's say we have a line of all the training, okay, and we'll say 3 out of 4 parts, okay. We understand the idea of fighting, just getting in there, being able to take punishment, give punishment, okay? We understand the idea of strategy and getting into a situation where you're fighting with somebody and you're setting things up, in order to fight very well with what your art gives you the tools for, okay? And the other part being just understanding very sophisticated elements of strategy. So you set the situation up in a manner that is conducive the best that you can to survive the situation. Okay? The final part of that is very important, and you will never learn this through learning how to fight. Okay? It's a totally different part of martial arts training, and that is what you do reflexively, what you train your body to do habitually without your conscious mind interfering. Because an initial attack and many parts of an attack happen too fast for you to be able to set up initially with some sort of a fighting application. Okay? So, in order to be able to respond to that, your ability has to be trained in. Okay? I'll use a good analogy for this. It was a Sylvester Stallone movie, and he had a very quirky villain he was facing, and they put him in some sort of a prison, and apparently in this prison in the future they inculcate you with a skill, and they taught him how to knit. Okay, so he would just be sitting, he would start knitting, and he'd say, what am I doing this for? I don't know, I don't remember learning nothing about this. Okay? Your martial arts have to be a little bit like that. You have to put them there. Now, in my case, I have 2 boys, and I trained them when they were very young this way. Okay? I literally put certain things into their movement and into how they handled a weapon. Very young, I mean, I'm talking like toddlers, just doing things with them, not to teach them like they'd be able to, be a swordsman at 5 years old, but teaching them, opening up neurological pathways, okay, that taught them how to move a certain way, okay, so that later on, when they were learning these skills, those things were open and working. And if they didn't get taught bad habits, they would develop very quickly efficiency, okay? And it's the same principle. When you're training with movement, distance, timing, you're training your mind to do things reflexively because they move at that speed. And another good analogy would be animals, okay? Animals don't learn how to fight. They learn genetically through archetypes that are in and have become part of their genetic code, and they are born with that ability, okay? And it may manifest at different ages. Not every animal can fight when they come out of the womb, but the skills are there. They don't have to be taught. All right? So this is the part that you can't learn sparring around, okay? And it's the part that you have to again, this is a big misconception. People tend to think that that means that you don't have to subject yourself to resistance training or to uncomfortable situations. Nothing could be farther from the truth. You have to learn how to apply those skills under conditions that are life and death, which, frankly, are a little bit more at stake than if you get into a ring and you might get slept, okay? Nobody likes to catch a fade. I know that. Nobody likes to get choked out, maybe shit on themselves. Worst case. But you know what? Nobody would, in that situation, say, I'd rather die. Well, some would, but most people wouldn't, okay? And when you go into that situation, there's a part of you that always knows that whatever happens, okay, you're probably not going to be killed. And again, we're going to talk about other misconceptions related to that too. But, you walk in, you're a tough guy, you say, what's up? You want to fight? You get out there. Some guy who's a martial arts instructor for the school puts you to sleep, and it's embarrassing. But you have an out. You say, man, you were right. You beat me a lot. Look, I have a lot of students that I made that way, okay? And they had nothing to be embarrassed about, because after I kicked their ass, they wanted to be a student, and they were humbled, and I felt like they could do something with it, okay? So everybody knows that on some level, okay? When you're in a life and death situation, you don't have that recourse, okay? Yes, there are no rules. Yes, there are no refs. But in addition to that, you don't have a recourse. And you won't fight the same way, okay? I'm just telling you. There are a lot of reasons for that. Way too many to go into in this presentation. Suffice to say, your body responds very differently when you're in a situation where there is an in and out, okay? Now, having said that, there is a misconception that the less dangerous forms of martial arts that don't deal with MMA type stuff are less lethal. And in fact, we're social beings. We get killed in social confrontations all the time, okay? And that includes using things like Aikido. You ever look at what happens when certain techniques are performed in Aikido? What happens to the head, the neck, okay? Judo, when you're thrown at a great distance, okay? You can very easily get maimed or even killed practicing those techniques, or even in a sports match, okay? So that's not the point of this. The point is, the goal of that is not to do that. And we respond in kind because we're social beings. The thing that kills us is we're not diligent in our training, in how we practice our okami skills and other such things. We're sloppy, or we're not on our best self when we get into a situation like that, which we can't control, okay? I mean, if I know I'm going to have a fight in a ring, I should probably prepare myself, okay? So it's not that point that some martial arts are more dangerous than others. And when these people who do self-preservation stuff talk about this is real, this is danger, that's bullshit too, okay? It's all dangerous, okay? And part of alleviating danger is how you train yourself in your training procedures to deal with danger, okay? Big part of that. We'll go one more. This is almost 15 minutes. We'll do a part 3 here to conclude this, okay? Just understand that this segment, what we've accomplished so far is we now have an understanding about relative danger, the relative part of the cycle in which different martial arts activities take place. Okay? All right.